In today's world, saving has become so much more of a luxury that not many of us think we can afford, as setting aside money at the end of the month seems almost impossible. This month, we delve into the topic of saving since July is National Savings Month, with a strong focus on how to save even when money is tight. At Just Money, we want to chat to our fellow South Africans and how they began their journey and what knowledge they have that they can pass on to others to encourage you to begin your very own. Today, I have with me Derick Mujera and Siphesihle Ziqhu. Welcome to the conversation, guys, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
So, guys, I want to kick straight off, and I think, Sipe, I'm going to start with you. We all know that our childhood has a massive impact on how we view our finances as adults. And I'd like to start with you and how your childhood and the habits that were formed around you influenced your money-making decisions. And how was saving as a topic? Was it ever encouraged in the household? And how was that dealt with growing up?
Yes, definitely. I feel like your childhood is the first kind of information you have about money. You see how your parents treat their lifestyle, their savings. I felt like I grew up in a fairly, in a good home. I felt like we were kind of well off. My mom was very sheltered about any struggles that she had. She didn't share any of her struggles with us. But I think the one thing she at least did do was make sure we understood how to save. There was a piggy bank in every room in our house. In the bathroom, There was a piggy bank. In the bedrooms, there were piggy banks. So if you even found a 10 cents on the floor, you kind of knew what to do with it. It goes in the piggy bank. And we would kind of open those piggy banks either when it's holiday time or when we're trying to get, maybe a present for a birthday. So you kind of understood that it has a larger purpose than your day to day. You're not just putting money in there so that you can get it out tomorrow. So I think in that way, definitely there was at least a sense of knowing what saving is. But definitely there wasn't, I guess, enough in terms of understanding the rest of your money management. I didn't know when my mom was okay and when she wasn't okay. And I think I'm going to try in my world at least to be a little bit better about understanding, the dynamics, when you need to make adjustments, when you need to make changes.
Now, CP, before we get to Derick, something that you said really piqued my interest now. You said you had a piggy bank almost in every room, including the bathroom. Now, that is incredible. And I have a bit of a different story here in that we hardly had money to save. And we also collected 10 cents and 20 cents, myself and my brother, but we'd have to hand that right in order to buy a bread. So a very different view because every cent counted. But in my case, I didn't grow up with the ability to save in order to open that up during a holiday season and perhaps, have a bit of a spoil here and there. So very interesting. And CP, I know that you're a mom as well. Have you shared that same sentiment with having piggy banks or with your kids as well?
I'm definitely trying to start that now. I think my kids are still quite small, so they haven't quite, have started understanding money as yet. But I'm definitely trying to foster that same saving spirit within the house, that we have to save for the things that we want. I definitely grew up in quite a privileged household, I think. I can't remember needing, the day-to-day stuff. But that also leads to a bit of a spoiled mentality. I think I also had to, growing up, kind of, pump the brakes and say, whoa, okay, it's their money, it's not my money. And it won't always be there. And it's not some ever-flowing fountain that will keep me alive forever. I will eventually be my own person who will be making my own decisions. So I definitely had to learn how to be separate from the privilege, that it was great to have everything you need, but there's lessons to be learned there as well.
So I want to come back to the mentality and how you had to learn. So take forward things that you felt were valuable, but then you also as an adult had to unlearn a few things. And I think that's often very hard once you've been set or you've grown up in a certain environment and then starting to make different decisions from that you are used to. So I want to come back to that very quickly. But Derick, I just want to switch to you and just ask what your relationship was like with saving growing up as well.
Okay, so for myself, growing up, it was a bit different from Sipe, I believe. I think when we were growing up, we also had a few piggy banks, but it was not really an idea that I would say my parents birthed in me or my siblings. It was something that we just came up with as siblings to say that we need to just put money aside maybe for sweets or things that would need on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, there was a piggy bank, definitely not in every corner of the house or bedroom, but there was not really any consistency in making sure that we were committed and piling up whatever we had into that piggy bank. But I can say that you would see in the house that as children, we didn't have that discussion with parents when it comes to money and savings. It was something that we usually just had to discuss ourselves as kids growing up. And you would also see sometimes the effects of not saving in the house when you run out of things. And sometimes you also see them trying to get a loan here and there. But it's just that from where I come from in Zim, our lines of credit are not that similar to that of South Africa. And getting a loan in Zim is very, very difficult because the country is somehow struggling. And back then it was also struggling. Things have gotten worse. So we never really depended much on loans. If you don't have, then you don't have. You just have to deal with what you have. So I can say, we didn't really have much of a discussion with parents regards to money. And I personally believe that it's a subject that I think if I had to discuss with my parents earlier, it would have taught me a whole lot of things before I became a teenager and eventually an adult.
I smiled so broadly when you said we as siblings had to save to buy the things that we needed, like sweets. How beautiful were the days when the only thing we needed was sweets, guys?
Yeah.
It was so beautiful just to save, and that time you could buy those 5-cent bubble gums. I don't know if you guys remember that, but those round, colorful ones. So I recall that. And there's something that you said, Derick, also that just resonated with me. You said growing up in Zim, it wasn't very easy to acquire a loan as adults because it was incredibly difficult because of the state of the economy. And things have obviously progressed and gotten worse. In my household, even though we knew that credit, or at least my parents knew that credit was available in some form or the other, it was a taboo topic. So we were the family that went without when we didn't have, because the worst thing you could have done was borrow money. Which is why when we didn't have, we looked for, my brother and I would be sent on a treasure hunt every Sunday with a bank packet. And we'd have to, and I've shared this in a previous podcast, but we'd have to look for 10 cents and 20 cents in a blazer pocket of my dad, or under the mattress, or in a cupboard. And basically that was the money that we used for bread. So I think coming back to the topic of credit, and CP, maybe I'll start with you. Do you recall, and I think you've mentioned this, do you recall ever your parents going or using credit to survive? And was that relationship with credit ever explained to you? Because I know where I come from, kids were kids. You could talk to your siblings about money, but it was never discussion for parents or kids to have with grown-ups. That's in my experience. What is yours, CP?
Definitely. Kids were kids, adults were adults. Kids don't mess in adults' business. That's kind of how we grew up. I think with the privilege of how I grew up and us at least being able to afford the daily needs, I never understood when my mother was okay, when she wasn't okay. And I never knew how she filled those gaps. So I think only now that I'm much older and having candid conversations with her, I can see where she did it. I can see when the loans came in. I can see where the credit cards filled the gaps. But to us, the kids, it was just everything was done. Okay, there was food in the fridge and we were able to get to school. We had uniforms on. So you didn't really think too much of it. But definitely now that I'm older, I can see that she maneuvered, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Quite smoothly between being able to provide and obviously needing that assistance of debt. And it's not always obviously the worst thing, but definitely you can kind of see where the struggles were, and also the legacy it leaves, how long it takes to then get out of it, how long it takes to then settle these debts. Someone could still be talking about a debt they've had for 10, 20 years, that same credit card haunting them. And I think now the older we get, we do see it. But definitely when I was little, very sheltered, didn't really get the insight of how debt was being used, or how credit, was being used within the house.
And hindsight, hey, it's a weird and a wonderful thing, because when you said that, my memory very quickly shifted to recalling as a teen the nights that my father didn't eat because my brother and I had seconds. And in the moment, like, you feel such guilt. At least that was my experience as a teenager when I thought back, oh goodness, I now know why my dad said no thank you for the second plate of food, or why he said he wasn't hungry. It wasn't because he wasn't hungry, it was because my brother and I wanted to eat more. So looking back, these things, we kind of fill the gaps as we get older. And obviously as a child, I know what it's like to feel protected and sheltered as well. But I think there's also, in my experience as a parent as well, I think there's also a fine line between protecting and sheltering, but also in the day and age that we're living in currently, having a little bit of transparency. And because these things are the conversations, or conversations are going to happen with or without you amongst children as they get older. So I also feel like there needs to be that level of transparency, because at the end of the day, these kids are also being impacted, whether you are financially savvy, whether you are relying on credit, whether you are, trying to save where you can. At the end of the day, they feel it, especially if they are living with you and they are your dependents. So I think, I think there's two sides of the coin there. And I try not to be that overprotective. I do try and give them as much, obviously age appropriately, those conversations that I feel is important and is going to impact them anyway. Siphe, your savings journey, you spoke about being aware of the very basic term of saving with regards to having piggy banks around. You spoke about having to adapt and unlearn things as an adult. Where would you say your savvy savings sort of personality or culture really started to take shape in your journey, your financial journey?
So I think for me, it was probably getting into high school. So I have two older siblings. They're, quite significantly older than me. So when I was in primary school, they were in high school. When I was in high school, they were now, adults. So when I got to high school, I'm now the only sibling, going to school in the house. And suddenly my mom asks me, to pay for certain stuff. And I was like, I don't have a job. How does this work? And she said, okay, we're going to open a bank account for you. And every now and again, I'm going to put some money in there if, you help me out with stuff, or I'm going to put some money in there if you do well at school. But I expect you to do things with this money. All right. So be it that maybe you want a new outfit for your friend's birthday party, that's going to come from you. If you decide not to make yourself a school lunch and you want to buy lunch, that's going to come from you. So I think already then the clock started turning and I said, no, wait a minute. It's not like the money is regular, but she's saying the expenses must be regular. And I quickly realized, even without her, saying it outright, that I'm going to need to save. I'm going to need to put money away longer than I need to spend it. And I do thank her for that. Getting a bank account at a young age is one of the things that I'm very thankful for from her. And I mean, this was before you had, the SMSs that tell you when money comes in. So I had to physically go to the ATM to see how much I have in the account. So it was a great learning curve. I made a lot of mistakes. There were moments I would blow money fast. But I think I needed to make those mistakes because it made it a lot easier transitioning into being an adult. In varsity, I was those kids who had a lot of side jobs. I was a receptionist. I worked at a tuck shop. Like, I tried to make sure that I had money coming in so that I still could take care of some of the expenses that I had of my own. That not everything would, I'd need to go back to my mom. So I'm very, grateful to my mom for starting that journey, fairly early so that I could enter adulthood with a better understanding. But definitely a lot of mistakes were made. There's a lot of adjusting I still have to make because I think with every new life era that you enter, it's almost like the rules change. So from high school into varsity, the rules changed. I was now living in a different province. My mom wasn't going to make sure I have every single meal. She was just going to give you maybe one lump sum at the beginning of the month. If it ran out, it ran out. And then obviously, again, going from varsity into working, living on your own. And then now from being on my own to having a family. So I think with every new journey, there's a lot of things you have to learn and unlearn and adjust to try and make sure that the new part of your life, is catered for. I think this last adjustment is probably my most difficult, going from being single lady, having fun, all your money's yours, and now you have dependents. There's people looking at you in the eye every day with needs. And you're just like, me? I need to provide? Like, that's a lot. So obviously, very different savings journey there. So lots to adjust. And I had to unlearn spending habits and saving, differently. But yeah, it's been quite the journey.
Sipe, I hear you. I am a mom to two as well. And wow, it is such a load. But at the end of the day, I think, as parents or, mothers, we want to protect, we want to shelter, we want to give them everything they need and obviously want when it is deserving and when we can afford. What would you say is your biggest lesson you had to unlearn?
Biggest lesson to unlearn, I think it all roots in spending habits. Why we spend the way we spend. I think even before you can tackle saving, you need to tackle spending, because I think the way we enter the world as adults once we're working, no one really tells you what to buy, what not to buy, when to buy it, what is good things to have, bad things to have. And it's a lot of unlearning you have to do in terms of spending habits. I can't draw out my card at every opportunity. There's many times I have to say no. And I mean, if for people who know me, they know I like being out and about. I love having a good time, but adjusting that mentality of being like, I can't do it all the time. Not every weekend is my weekend, and not every trip is my trip. I live in a different province to like my entire family. And obviously they're going to put pressure on you to see you all the time. I want to see the kids, etc., etc. But you have to be able to say no. You have to be able to say, I've planned this trip at this time, and that is the only time I'll be able to afford this thing. And I think a lot of it is in the spending habits, learning to say no, changing your mindset about what's necessary. I mean, something as small as a TV. I still don't have a smart TV. And I mean, I definitely we'll go through the aisles at the hypermarkets and see the smart TVs, and I want it. I'm envious of people who have smart TVs, but since there's nothing wrong with the TV I have, there's no need to make that additional purchase. So it's a lot of around the spending habits, making sure that you're actually making the right decisions.
That brings me to a thought. In one of our previous podcasts, we had Ramokebe, and he tackled the topic of instant gratification. And as you were talking about the TV, I recalled something a couple of years ago. Our TV packed up and we went months without it, to be honest. And it's quite hard when you have kids, I must be honest. And there was some competition or something going where it was during a World Cup. And if you bought this TV and South Africa won the World Cup, you'd get your money back. So amazingly, that was when I decided if there was ever a time, because I had saved up the money, I just couldn't get myself to buy, and it's expensive. I couldn't get myself to buy it. So amazingly, I purchased this TV and the Springboks won and I got my money back, and it was the best feeling. And these things don't happen often, but it just showed me that like just sticking it out sometimes and, really going for when you need something as opposed to when you're envious or when you want something can definitely also pay off. And just being a little bit smarter and having those honest conversations with yourself, and sometimes answering yourself as well, even though you look crazy, but just start being honest with yourself when it comes to affordability is so important. And Derick, I'd like to check in with you now around your savings journey. And what was the biggest lesson you had to unlearn as you kickstarted your savvy savings journey yourself?
Okay, I think the biggest lesson to unlearn for myself was to cut out impulse buying. I realized that it's kind of like a disease that has caught up with many South African millennials, if I can say, or young adults and teenagers as well. It's very easy to walk into a shop, look at some clothes, and you end up buying without budgeting for it. So I've learned to have delayed gratification, plan for things, and not buy things that I want, but buy things that I need first, and then I would definitely budget for the things that I want. So that process has helped me to have like a thought process of how I spend my money, I just don't spend my money because I want things at the moment. I have to think about it. I have to write it down. I have to plan ahead. If the money is not there, then I have to wait. It's not easy to want something and you do not have to get it at the moment because you're telling yourself that, hey, you need to be disciplined. You can always get it later. Maybe by that time it's out of stock or it's now at a higher price. But the benefits far outweigh the disadvantage in my case. That delayed gratification feeling has a lot that it brings. And not only are you saving money, but you're also avoiding a lot of problems that come ahead, like having piles of credit piling up just because you didn't plan on your spending.
I hear you. So guys, I mean, that's really interesting so far to me. I think there's a lot that I resonate with from both of you. At Just Money, as you guys know, we love to delve into topics that are often considered perhaps uncomfortable for a lot of people, and money is definitely one of them. But what we aim to do at Just Money as well is to offer practical tips and guidance. And I know about a month ago, I offered a masterclass where we spoke about savvy ways and practical ways to save money. And I'd like to jump into that very quickly. And Sipe, maybe we can start with you on this one. Do you have some very practical things that you have done or instituted inside of your household that have really helped your family and you to save? Like simple things. It could be things that someone else could potentially see as very minute or insignificant. But I really want to get into those practical tips on things that you've come to make part of your daily habits that have really helped and eased your burden.
It really does start in the small things. So from even the way you pick out the appliances you get in your house. I remember going out with my partner and I had to almost tear him away from certain appliances because I have a rule that you can't buy an appliance that only has one use. It just doesn't sit well with me if I'm going to put money into something that only has one use. So you have to show me all the other uses, and that's the only way I'm going to buy into that idea. So kind of making sure that everything you have in your home has that multi-use or giving it a multi-use. So I know for me, for example, especially now with the cold of this winter, everyone's going to put a heater on. But it's not always the most cost-effective thing to do. So I've now resorted to using my dry buddy when I'm drying my kids' clothes as a way to heat up their bedroom, for example. So I'm giving this item another use that I was already going to be using it because, a lot of the days in Cape Town, it does rain. So the dry buddy does come in handy, especially with their little clothes and they're wearing, 1,000 outfits a day. So I know on days when I'll be doing their washing, I put their clothes in the dry buddy, put the dry buddy in their bedroom, close the door. Their bedroom is warm. That's a heater I don't have to put on for that evening. So for me, multi-use in every aspect, making things work more than how they're marketed to work. And then learning skills that will also allow for you to stay away from spending more money. So I think in that previous workshop, I had said, one of the greatest things for me was knowing how to sew. So it's something so simple, but it takes away from me having, number one, to go to tailors for all of my stuff. And for anything that tears or that needs a repair, I'm able to do it myself. I don't have to get new clothes all the time. I'm able to keep my clothes together. And I mean, not every tear is detrimental. Not every rip means the end of that item. So learning to sew or just being able to sew has actually, I think, saved me quite a lot of money in terms of clothes, especially with my kids as well. Kids are very active. They're going to be doing the splits in the wrong pants. So it's quite handy to be able to stitch that pant leg back up, back into the street they go. That's one less pair of leggings or jeans that you have to buy. So yeah, those are kind of the things I've been using in my day-to-day life. It's been pretty helpful.
That's amazing. So I don't have the gift of being able to sew, but what I do is if I'm in a store and I see, those, I don't even know what you call them, but you can definitely, you can use them to cover a hole. So like little patchworks and stuff like that, I generally give them to my mom. And when there's a hole, which usually happens on the knee part for my son, because he's always climbing things and sliding on the floors, generally just putting a patch over it on the inside, just giving it a funky look as well. So I definitely resonate with that. I think the dry buddy thing is revolutionary. I must say, legendary. Did not consider that, but that is definitely very practical. And obviously with us being in winter in South Africa, it's definitely something that people can use. I know lots of people have the Dry Buddy as well, but I'm not sure if they've actually realized that it's a 2-in-1. When you find an appliance that can cook and clean and do all of those things, let me know, because that's the one thing. Like ironing, oh my word, like when you find another use for an iron, please let me know, because that is the one thing I generally just hate in general. Like ironing is the worst. So that's great. That's fantastic. Derick, I want to move to you. Do you have any practical things that you use in your household that you've come to realize actually saves you a penny at the end of the day?
Okay, so I would say some habits as well before we move on to any maybe activities or things that we do. So I've learned to write up a list of all the expenses that I know that are basic, everything that we need before we can spend. So I know that this expense costs this much and we're gonna need this quantity. So I try to be exact as possible. I don't just have a list with no rand value attached to it. There's also a rand value so that I know that at the end of the day or at the end of the month, I have used so much and I'm going to be left with so much. And that helps me when we go shopping or grocery shopping. I'm not just going to spend 10K just because we suddenly realize that we need this. So we pre-plan things. So we know that when we're now going grocery shopping, we are going to spend this exact amount. And if we are to go over that amount, then we're definitely not going to exceed. If it means putting stuff back, then we have to. So that has taught us to stick to a budget that is also planned way in advance. Then the second thing that I've taught myself is to pay myself first. So when I say pay myself first, it means that before I can spend on anything else, I have to pay myself through saving. It doesn't need to be a huge amount. It can be maybe 500 Rand, 1,000, depending on how much I have put as a percentage that I say that I'm committing to pay myself. So to make that easy for myself, I've set like a stop order where a certain amount comes from my bank account and it goes into my Just Invest account, where it builds up each and every month. And there's also a compounding interest that builds up on that account. Then when it comes to day-to-day activities and how we live, I've also adopted to take the bus often rather than take a drive to work by myself. I think we can all relate to the fuel price hikes that we are seeing in South Africa every single month or 3 months. Things are just getting worse. The price of fuel is going up. So I told myself that, if there is a scheduled bus system that is very much reliable, I think it's better to cut down on the amount of time that I drive and also maybe just take the bus each and every day. It's very convenient. It helps me to get to work on time. I don't get to lose anything by doing that. And I've seen that I've saved quite a great deal of money just by doing that simple thing. Then lastly, we all want nice things, like I said, clothes and stuff like that. So instead of just taking out that credit card and swiping it, I've also resorted to just labor. When you labor your clothes and you get them maybe after 3 months or something that you really need and you get it after a certain number of months, there is no interest that is accumulating. Labor is not really credit. So if you don't manage to pay it, then it means that you were not ready for it. You didn't plan for it. So you just labor it, pay for it. And then once your labor is done, you collect your goods and you're happy. So it helps with that delayed gratification that I did mention about. There's not really any other life skills that I've learned for myself that could really help me with money compared to you guys when you talked about sewing. But my wife is a very good sewing person. She knows how to sew. She doesn't buy clothes a lot. I think she can make up a dress in a day, and the next day she can wear that to church or any event. That's the gift that she has. She can design and sell for herself, and that has helped herself and myself to save a lot of money in terms of clothes, and it comes in very, very, very handy for us.
That's incredible. That is incredible. When you mentioned your first practical tip, I thought, how often do we go to a grocery store and we've only got the list of items with no rand value, and when we get to the till, we have a mini panic attack? What I loved about that idea, Derick, is the fact that when you're at the till, you can very quickly see whether or not you are matching up to your budget and whether or not you are overcompensating. So something I've never tried, I must be honest, I've never actually put rand values next to them. But what I do is I do comparisons on my apps. So I'll take let's say I've got 10 grocery items that I need. I'll put it in my basket on the Checkers app. I'll put it in my basket on the Woolies app. And I'll put it in my basket on the Pick and Pay ASAP app. And it gives me a very quick, and yes, it takes a little bit of time and admin, but if I compared it to what my father had to do, he used to sit with pamphlets, guys. And you will know this because back then there wasn't cell phones, there wasn't internet. I used to watch this man go through every single grocery store pamphlet, circle the ones where it's cheaper, make a list, and actually drive around. And we now know that that's not cost effective either because of petrol prices. So I think we have become lazy in a way because we've got more tech and more support in terms of the apps that are out there. And obviously not just the apps, there's so many other ways that we can do this where we can cross-check and we can compare. But not many of us do this. And yes, it takes a little bit of time, but I do think that it's a very good way to start that savings habit. So I really value those practical tips, some of which I've already started and some of which I didn't. And I think, Derick, if there's one thing from yours is attaching that rand value and also getting my kids involved, I think has become quite a big thing in my house where we're teaching them, looking at the price of the goods on the shelf, looking at it per kilo, because obviously sometimes you just look at the price and you think automatically that's cheaper. But when you look at it in the broader spectrum of how much it is per kilo or per 100 gram, whatever it is, it makes a difference. Where do you stand, Sipe, on bulk shopping? So I belong to this Facebook group called Stockpilers. Very active group, couple of 100,000 people on there, always sharing tips and stores where they're getting things for cheaper, and it's generally buying 10 at a time. Where do you stand on stockpiling?
To be honest, it's not something I've explored as yet. I've joined the Facebook groups, but I haven't had the guts to go try it out and see. So it is definitely something I'm interested in, but I haven't taken that step just yet.
Yeah. Okay, so I only started getting interested in it when people were going crazy for toilet paper. There was a time when people were shopping for toilet paper as if there was no more left on the earth. And it got me thinking, like, you know, what if something happens and I needed a certain amount of whatever and I only have for the next week? So I'm also not quite there yet, but I do take advantage of the 3 for 2 deals when it's something that I need. I struggle to buy 3 for 2 when I only needed 1. So I'm following that journey and I'm taking lots of tips from other South Africans, but I'm not there myself. Derick, do you have experience with stockpiling?
We have learned to buy things in bulk so that they can last us for the whole month. And there are certain stores that we've identified that are cheaper, where if you buy in bulk, it's actually cheaper if you calculate it as a cost per product. So instead of just buying things randomly, like, okay, now we need soap, I'm going to rush to Pick and Pay. Oh, now we've run out of this, I'm going to run to Woolies. We found that it also accumulates in that impulse buying or buying things that you really didn't plan to, and it interferes with your budget. So bulk buying for me really works because we know exactly what we need in quantities, like I said, for the month. And we already have put a rand value to say that this is the exact amount that we are going to use for the month. So it really helps in terms of planning our month with our groceries especially.
So I'm with you in that we are aware as a family what we need to survive for the month. But one thing that I've changed in the last year and a half is we no longer do a monthly shop. And obviously this is not going to work for everyone. It depends on your family's needs. Obviously my kids are with my mom during the week, so I know exactly how much we need. But what I've realized with us is that when we do a large grocery shop, I tend to spend more than when I do a weekly shop based on a plan. So I do a meal prep, I do a meal plan, I do what is needed for the week, what are the meals we're going to have Monday, Tuesday through to generally to Saturday. Sunday, I normally make a lovely lunch for us, which also obviously goes into the budget, but it's a very different kind of lunch than we would have for the rest of the week. So Sipe, do you do meal prepping and planning? And if you do you feel that that works out cheaper?
Yes, definitely. I think anything that involves spending, planning is key. So, for example, in my household, it is a bit of a collaboration. My partner does all of the cooking, but he's not very good with lists. So, weekly we have to sit down and he will have all these grand ideas of what he wants to cook and what he wants to make. But I'm the person who has to make the list. So definitely a plan is the way to go. I think in the same experience you've had, weekly shopping has worked out a lot better for us. I think there are specific items that you can buy in bulk, but in terms of, like you're saying, especially your fresh produce, the things that you're actually going to use up, you actually do buy a lot less when you know what you're actually going to use, because there wouldn't be a need for you to get 50 bananas at the beginning of the month if 40 of them won't make it. And I mean, especially when you have kids who maybe go to school, go to creche, there's a lot of lunch boxes, a lot of snacks. I literally am counting exactly what they're going to get each day. Okay, Monday, it's a fruit and a yogurt. Tuesday, it's a sandwich and a fruit. You know what I mean? So that you know exactly what you're going to need. And it's also helped, with waste management. I never have a fruit go off the way I used to before. Because before, I think you just pick 5 or 6 different fresh produce and you just buy all of them at the same time, but that's not how you're going to use them. So there'd be a lot of waste. Whereas now it's like, okay, I'm only going to buy bananas in the beginning of the month, maybe apples, the next week. I'll only need, the next fruit the week after that. There isn't a need to kind of have it all done in payday week. So I definitely agree with that, planning and keeping the fresh produce to the weekly. And then the bulk buying is obviously for your non-disposable. So like you're saying, like the toilet paper. I think in my area, I found a place that sells like dishwashing liquid and chicken, like these 5-liter no-name bottles. And I was like, I don't need the brand for dishwashing liquid. I can buy a 5-liter. Yeah, exactly. And you keep the original bottle and you just keep, doing refills in your house. So yeah, I definitely see that benefit of changing how you shop.
I also just remember from the masterclass, there was a few tips. So groceries or fresh produce, rather, your fruits and your vegetables, it's cheaper to buy them generally after 5 p.m. because then the new stock or the new produce comes in. So generally we'll run to the store because I only cook after 5 anyway. So I tend to buy that time. Another thing that came through was adding a little bit of water at the end of your sunlight or your hand wash just to make it go further, something very small. And another one that I found really interesting, and I didn't know this, guys, is at ShopRite, when the washing powder bags break sometimes and they leak or some of the product falls out, what generally happens is they actually create see-through packets of those and people pick them up for $10. And I found this on the Stockpiler group. So it's generally your Omo, your Surf, your MAC washing powder, a little bit of each of that, and they make up a 2-kilogram bag and you pick it up for like 1/10 of the price. So next time you go to ShopRite, ask for the waste product and they actually have it on a separate aisle usually at the front at the tills, and you can actually pick that up for a fraction of the price. So that's just another tip for people. Did not know that, but now I do, because washing powder is extremely expensive, and with kids as well, I tend to do washing quite a lot. So I'm definitely, Sipe, did you know about that?
I did not, and now I have one more thing to get started. Thank you.
Yeah, I was blown away. And I saw so many of the stockpilers going to the front of the queue asking for the waste washing powder. And it's the exact same product, just mixed with the other products, and you pay $10 for it. So definitely something that people can use. I want to very quickly switch to Derick and maybe just ask, are you using any apps, or what technology or apps are you currently using that support your savings culture?
Not really at the moment. I can say my bank is the only app at the moment that I can use to track my savings. Like I said, I have like savings pockets that are provided by my bank, NetBank. So there is like the Just Invest savings pocket where money goes in there a certain amount and I can access it anytime I want to. If maybe I have an emergency, then there is a different kind of savings pocket where you don't touch the money for at least maybe 30-day notice. Then there is a third one where you put a certain fixed amount and you don't touch it for the whole year. So it all depends on your savings needs and investment needs. So I don't really have any other app that I use for savings besides my banking app, and that's the one that I use to track at the moment my spending and my savings.
So I am with you. I use my banking app as well. I'm with FNB, and there's a lovely feature there where you can actually input, they categorize your spending. So your debits versus your fuel. And basically, as you are spending money, it tells you what you would potentially have left after you've spent what you generally spend. So they pick up on your habits. Obviously, as you swipe, it goes into a certain category and you can set those categories, which is something I find quite useful, because once the debit orders come off, I can literally just swipe on my app and I can see, oh, now that your debit orders have come off, this is how much you generally are going to spend for the rest of the month. And after that, this is how much you have left. So over and above that, I use, and CP, I think you were actually one of the people who mentioned this, but the app by Liberty called Stash, something I also use for my yearly savings. And then obviously I'm also very big on my loyalty programs. So Clicks is one, Spar is another, Pick and Pay, the Smart Shopper, as well as Checkers, because those savings are immediate and you see them at the tills. And I generally, when I go to the store, I generally have a figure in mind that I cannot exceed. So let's say, for example, it's 2,000, just making that up for now. And I get to the till and I swipe my card and I get a 200 off. It feels great, guys. It's immediate and it's instant, which is fantastic. CP, what apps and loyalty programs do you use that's currently contributing to your savings culture?
I love my phone. So if I can do multiple things on my phone, I am in. So like you mentioned, I also use Stash. I think it helped me quite a bit, especially with the 10 cents challenge. I know I never read beyond the decimal point on my bank statement. So it kind of helps to know you're saving without really seeing it, if that makes sense. So yeah, definitely. I love it. You can kind of set quite a lot of different things. You can either stash because it's a sunny day or stash because of load shedding. So I know I have a lot of money that went in there now. And it stashes by stage. So stage 6 is the most I've ever stashed.
Yeah.
But definitely love that tool. I think I also use quite a lot of the programs on the banking apps. So I think at the moment I'm with Capitec. So there's the Live Better rewards savings plan. So you have like a little bit of cash back with certain partners, and it's basically stashes all your change. So for any purchase that you make on your card, it like rounds up to the nearest, I think, 2 Rand and stashes that for you. So if you bought something, for 51 Rand, it's gonna, stash 1 Rand for you. So I'm a fan of anything on my phone. I think even like you were saying with the loyalty programs, I have an app called Stow Card. And you can basically load all your cards on it at the same time. And you can kind of keep track of all the points that you have on all the different cards. Because I think for me, that was the main thing. A lot of the time, you'd only know when you're at the store what's on your card. So this is a very nice app because I literally load, I think, Clicks card, Pick and Pay, ShopRite, Woolies, every rewards card I have, and it'll tell me what the points are there, and it'll tell me the current specials that are running on those different cards, all on one app. So that's one of my favorite apps at the moment, because it also allows me to plan before I leave my house, before I go to the store. So now at least when I go to Clicks, I know how many points I have while I'm making my plan, and I don't have to fall into the Clicks trap of accidentally spending thousands.
Yeah, what's great about that as well, CP, sorry to break your word, but I often don't always know when my points are going to expire. And generally, you only find that out, like you say, when you're at the till. So if that was all upfront, that would be so useful, because generally when I don't go to Clicks often, because like you say, you could spend a fortune in one visit, but I would love to know, and I'm going to look into that app, because currently I've got a pocket at the back of my phone where I store my cards. But I think that's really useful. So because, we could potentially forget our card, but we don't often forget our phone. So I think that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that tip with us.
Oh yeah, definitely. It literally is one of my favorite. It also takes away, I think, from having to have all the cards on you, because they basically store a virtual card on the app. So yeah, it just helps a lot. You kind of know as well the coupons and all the specials, because obviously with like your ShopRite and I think your Woolworths, your card is more of a discount card rather than a points card. So they also you get that information on the app as well. But yeah, I'm very tech savvy in that way. I try to make sure that I kind of get in on all the new ins and outs of what is what that I can do from my phone. Like, I'm that person, I never want to see a bank branch. I never want to go outside. I never want to go to the store. So having everything in the palm of my hand is very useful.
Absolutely. I'm with you on that. To end off, Derick, I'm going to jump to you very quickly. Let's chat about, let's say we've got someone listening who has not started their savings journey, because as you and I both know, saving and the word budget can be scary because, when you're looking at your statements, like I've said before, it's a very real account of what's happening or what's not happening. What would you say to someone who's kind of kickstarting their savings journey and don't potentially know where to start?
Okay, so the biggest lesson that I've learned is to put something aside. It doesn't have to be a huge amount, like I said. There is a rule that I'm trying to stick to at the moment and apply, which is the 70-10-10-10 rule by Jim Rohn, who's one of the philosophers I listen to. So with this rule, you do not spend anything more than 70% of your salary for yourself. All right, so you stick to 70 or less. And then the 30%, you divide it into 3. So there is 10% that you can give, maybe just in general for people, handouts and stuff like that. Then there's a 10% that you can maybe put to charity or to your church, depending on your religion and your views. And then there's 10% that you can save and invest. So those amounts can gradually increase, obviously, maybe as your income increases. And one big lesson that I learned is that when your income increases, you shouldn't also increase on your expenses, rather increase on your savings. That way it will help you to plan for your expenses better, because if you increase your expenses as your salary increases, you tend to have more problems, and now you tend to credit, you understand, because it's not really planned, because it's now piling up, if I can say that. So the 70-10-10-10 rule really helps, because you know that you are committing to a certain percentage of your salary per month that you can use, and then the 30% is for savings, giving, and all of that. So if it's planned like that, I think it's quite easy. And like I said, you can start very small. It can even be 100 Rand, it can even be 500 Rand, 1,000 Rand, because 100 Rand a month is better than nothing at all, and starting is better than not doing anything at all. So action is needed right there, because if there's no action, then it means that you have nothing to commit to. But once you start and you kind of like automate maybe your savings, it will be also easier. By setting a stop order, you just see the money go out, because sometimes you might be tempted not to put some money in there because you have some expenses that came out of nowhere. But if it's a stop order that is already set and is taking a certain amount to go there, it's already part of your budget. It's already planned. So it takes off the burden from you and the confusion around, should I save this amount or not? Should I do it this month or not? You understand? So it's quite easy, and it has helped me a lot. And maybe jump into some programs if you have, maybe at your workplace. For example, here we have the Alan Gray, which really helps. There is a certain amount that goes every single month. And then only when I really need the money, maybe there is an emergency or there's something big coming up, then I request for the money to be paid out to myself. Or I would rather just wait for the rest of the year. Then in December, we know that there is also like huge expenses going on there. There's impulse buy, people are excited, they spend a lot of money. And then you find that your salary alone is not enough. So that comes in very handy, because you are waiting for the Hoyo to get that money that you really saved. And it's sweet when you spend money after waiting for so long to pile up and then spend it on whatever you want.
So I'm with you there, Derick. What I'm hearing is being aware, being determined. So making it a commitment to forming a part of your daily habits or your monthly habits, and then doing research and educating yourself about what opportunities there are that you might be missing. So I'm also someone who uses my company benefit, which is fantastic. And like you said, it's so nice at the end of the year to not have to tap into that salary when it gets paid to take my kids out. And so that's my goal. Every year I have the same goal, is to be able to have that fun during summer and treat the kids, and knowing that I've planned for it. And I'm hearing that quite strongly today, is an attitude is nothing without the plan, and without sticking and persevering and committing to that plan. So thank you so much for those thoughts, Derick. Sipe, any final words from you with regards to starting and how to take the fear out of starting that savings journey?
Yes, definitely. I think for me, the greatest piece of advice I got in terms of saving is to never compromise on long-term saving. Basically, what that means is making sure you have a good retirement fund or retirement annuity, making sure that you're saving for maybe your children's education, because your future you is not very forgiving. Your future you will not understand why they don't have what they need. So in terms of just long-term saving specifically, do not compromise that. No matter what salary point you are at, the long-term saving is very, very important. And you need to reach out to those who know. You need to be asking the people who have the expertise how to make that work so that you never have to compromise. You never should be in a position where you are putting less away for your retirement or having to compromise on, education for your children, or funds that will help benefit your family in the long term. And then I think when it comes more to then, your shorter term savings, it's all about being goal oriented. And in that, you need to ask yourself whether that goal makes sense. It's not enough to just have one. The goal itself has to make sense. So, for example, you can say that maybe you want the new pair of Nike sneakers and you're going to save towards it, and that's perfectly fine. But does that make sense? Is that new pair of Nike sneakers going to bring enough satisfaction in your life to have made that savings journey worth it? So definitely having goals in mind and remembering that your future self is not forgiving. Your future self won't remember that you had a party to attend and a new outfit to buy. Your future self will not remember you needed a smart TV. So it's just all about understanding where you can and cannot compromise. And I think that's the main advice that I think I have on that savings journey.
Thank you so much. I think this was such an incredibly rich conversation for me. I hope you have learned something, because I definitely have. I think the journey of saving and budgeting and understanding someone's or your own financial journey is an ongoing learning process. I don't think it ever comes to a close. And Siphesihle, you mentioned something in the beginning that as you navigate the different phases of your life, that financial journey takes a different form sometimes. And we need to be able to adapt to that. Because if the last 3 years have taught us anything, is that things can happen so quickly, and we've got to have those plans in place. And being able to adapt and pull on resources around you and speaking to the right people and understanding that despite life being the longest thing you'll ever do, it also goes by so incredibly quickly. And before you know it, your toddlers are entering university. And I hear you when you say your future self is not forgiving, because things happen so quickly and we've got to spring into action. And sometimes we think about saving as something we can put off, but emergencies don't think, let me just wait until she's in a better position. So I want to just really thank you from the bottom of my heart for being so open and so candid and sharing your very real practical solutions and tips. I really do feel like it's going to make a difference. I want to thank you both so much for joining me today. And I really hope that you both got an opportunity to learn. Thank you so much for joining me.
A pleasure. Thank you for hosting.
As my guests have shared so openly, it is never too early or too late to start saving. Saving money isn't restricted to setting aside a monthly amount. It also consists of the daily actions we may take for granted, such as shopping around for grocery deals, eating out less, or even buying dual-use products. With the right attitude and a plan of action, saving can be integrated easily enough into your everyday life. You can visit our website for further savings tips at www.justmoney.co.za. For now, thank you again for tuning in and stay savvy.